The first crack in my marriage didn't happen behind closed doors. It happened in front of 20 people at my mother's 80th birthday dinner. The private room at Cypress House Grill in Monterey glowed with warm lights. My mother, Margaret Brooks, smiled as everyone settled around the table. My sister Helen arranged pink roses beside her plate, while my son Ryan had just arrived from Sacramento, still wearing his work shirt. I had spent weeks planning every detail because Mom's knees made walking painful. I requested the perfect table, brought her favorite cushion from home, and even confirmed that the restaurant had wheelchair access. It was supposed to be one of her happiest birthdays. Then my husband David Carter's daughter walked in. 22-year-old Sienna arrived nearly 40 minutes late, dressed in designer clothes and carrying an expensive handbag. She kissed her father, nodded politely at my mother, and sat down as if nothing had happened. I ignored the delay. For nearly 2 years I had done everything possible to become a good stepmother. I paid her phone bill, her car insurance, her college tuition at Pacific Coast University. Even the monthly allowance David insisted helped her focus on school. He always smiled and said the same thing. "You're giving her opportunities one never could." I believed him. After losing my first husband, believing in a second chance felt wonderful. Dinner remained pleasant until Ryan asked Sienna how college was going. She looked up from her phone and smirked. "Pretty easy," she said. "Life gets simple when Dad marries someone who treats automatic payments like a love language." Ryan's smile disappeared. My sister slowly lowered her glass. David chuckled. Not because it was funny. Because pretending it was a joke was easier than admitting it was cruel. I looked directly at Sienna. "What exactly do you mean?" She shrugged. "Nothing. Just saying you're generous." The room became quiet. Then she lifted her wine glass. "To Dad," she announced. He finally found the perfect retirement plan. Nobody laughed. I felt every pair of eyes move toward me. "Apologize," I said calmly. Sienna raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For insulting me. In front of my family. On my mother's birthday." Before she could answer, David placed his hand over mine. Not painfully. Just firmly enough to stop me. Then he smiled. "She's not your daughter, Claire. Don't try to discipline her." He said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Something inside me went completely still. I looked down at his hand. Then back into his eyes. "Fine," I whispered. "If she's not my daughter." I gently removed his hand from mine. "Then I guess I don't have to support her like one anymore." The room fell into complete silence. The drive home was painfully quiet. For nearly 10 minutes, David said nothing. His hand stayed locked on the steering wheel as the California coastline disappeared behind us. Finally, he sighed. "You embarrassed me tonight." Claire stared through the windshield. "I embarrassed you? You challenged my daughter in front of everyone." She mocked me. "It was a joke. And then you told me I wasn't allowed to correct her. Because you're not her mother." Claire slowly turned toward him. "So I'm not her parent?" David nodded. "Exactly." She looked back out the window. "But I'm expected to pay for everything." His grip tightened. "Don't overreact." "I'm not. Her tuition is due next week. Don't make emotional decisions." Claire almost laughed. Interesting. Whenever a bill arrived, Sienna suddenly became just a kid. Whenever she insulted Claire, she magically became an independent adult. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive. Claire woke before sunrise. Sleep hadn't lasted more than 3 hours. She made coffee, placed a heating pad against her aching back, and opened her laptop at the kitchen table. Payroll consulting had taught her one valuable lesson. Numbers rarely lied. People did. She opened 20 months of bank statements. At first, everything looked familiar. college tuition, insurance, monthly allowance, phone payments, the Jeep lease. Then something unusual caught her attention. Several large transfers labeled Education Fund. Almost $35,000. She clicked on the payment history. Her heartbeat slowed. The money hadn't been sent to Pacific Coast University. It had gone into an account belonging to Carter Development Group, David's real estate company. She checked another payment. The same account. Another. The same. Again. 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 Claire leaned back in her chair. No. For a long moment she hoped there was a simple explanation. Then another memory surfaced. David insisting that he handled the tuition payments himself. David asking her to just transfer the money. David always promising he'd take care of the paperwork. Her stomach twisted. Without saying a word, she opened her banking app. One by one, she canceled every automatic payment she personally controlled. The monthly allowance. The Jeep payment. The credit card Sienna used. The phone bill. Then she transferred her consulting income into a separate account David couldn't access. She didn't touch Sienna's college. She didn't call the university. She simply stopped volunteering her own money. At exactly 7:08 a.m., David walked into the kitchen holding his phone. What the hell did you do? Claire calmly rotated the laptop toward him. The bank statements covered the table. She pointed to the highlighted transfers. I respected your boundary. He frowned. What? You said she isn't my daughter. She folded her hands. So now. You can support her yourself. David's eyes dropped onto the transactions. For just a second. The color disappeared from his face. Claire noticed. And in that moment, she realized the insult at her mother's birthday wasn't the biggest secret hiding inside her marriage. David forced a smile. You're misunderstanding what you're looking at. Claire remained silent. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, trying to sound calm. The money wasn't stolen. Then why wasn't it sent to Pacific Coast University? It's more complicated than that. She almost laughed. Whenever the subject was his money, everything became complicated. Whenever it was hers, everything was family. Claire slowly turned the laptop toward him. Show me where the education fund is. I don't have access from my phone. You have your laptop upstairs. His expression hardened. I'm not going to be interrogated in my own kitchen. Claire looked around the room. The white cabinets. The hardwood floor. The breakfast nook she had renovated 5 years before meeting David. This is my kitchen too, she said quietly. The words hit harder than she expected. David stood abruptly. You're making a huge mistake. No, Claire replied. I'm finally reading the numbers. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and left, slamming the front door behind him. At 10:14 a.m., Claire's phone rang. Sienna. She answered. My card isn't working. Not hello. Not how are you. Just the card. I know. What do you mean you know? I removed you as an authorized user. Silence. You what? You heard me. I'm standing in the middle of Santa Monica Plaza. Then maybe today isn't the day to buy new clothes. You can't just do this. I already did. You've completely lost your mind. Claire leaned back in her chair. No. I've finally stopped ignoring it. Sienna ended the call without another word. Within 20 minutes Claire's phone started ringing again. David's sister. His cousin. 2 family friends. Every conversation sounded almost identical. She's still in college. She's only 22. Family helps family. Claire listened patiently. Then she asked the same question every single time. If everyone believes Sienna needs financial help, why isn't her father paying? The line always went silent. No one answered. That afternoon Claire visited her bank. Her longtime manager, Laura Benson, welcomed her into a private office. Together they reviewed every transaction from the past 20 months. Line by line. Receipt by receipt. When they finished, Laura slowly removed her glasses. The total is just over $91,000. Claire stared at the printed report. $91,000. She remembered postponing repairs on the house because David insisted tuition came first. She remembered skipping physical therapy sessions to save money. She remembered saying no to vacations because they were being responsible. Now she realized whose future had actually been protected. Not Sienna's. David's. Laura gently closed the folder. Claire. I think you should speak to an attorney. Claire nodded slowly. As she stood to leave, her phone vibrated again. A text from David. Please don't make this bigger than it already is. She looked at the message for several seconds. Then locked her phone without replying. For the first time since their marriage, she wasn't afraid of losing him. She was afraid of discovering how much more he had hidden. Claire met with attorney Ethan Brooks the following morning. His office overlooked the marina in Santa Barbara. After listening without interrupting, he spread her bank statements across the conference table. So, he said calmly, your husband told you these payments were covering Sienna's education. Every single one. And you transferred the money because you trusted him. Claire nodded. Ethan highlighted several transactions with a yellow marker. These payments didn't go to a university. He circled another line. This one paid off a commercial loan. Another. This one went directly into Carter Development Group. He looked up. If these transfers were made under false pretenses, this isn't simply a marriage problem. Claire felt her stomach tighten. What does that mean? It means we need to find out whether David misrepresented where your money was going. For the first time, someone wasn't telling her to forgive. Someone was asking for evidence. When Claire returned home, the house was unusually quiet. David was cooking dinner. Her favorite lemon chicken. The table was already set. He even opened a bottle of wine. For a brief second, it almost felt normal. I've been thinking, he said softly. We both said things we regret. Claire didn't answer. He placed a plate in front of her. I hate fighting with you. She looked at him carefully. 2 days ago he had been furious. Now he sounded gentle. Almost too gentle. What changed? She asked. David smiled. I realized you're under a lot of stress. Something about those words made her uneasy. Not because of what he said, but because of how carefully he chose them. The next afternoon Claire stopped by her office. Her assistant hesitated before closing the door. Can I ask you something? Of course. I've had 3 clients call this week. Claire frowned. They all asked if you were planning to retire. What? They said they heard you've been forgetting things lately. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. Forgetting things? Her assistant nodded. I told them I hadn't noticed anything. Claire didn't need to ask who had started the rumor. Only one person benefited if people questioned her memory. David. That same evening, Sienna walked into her father's home office. She wasn't looking for him. She was looking for the Jeep registration. Instead, she overheard him speaking on the phone. I just need a little more time. A pause. No, she hasn't figured everything out. Another pause. Once I convince her to calm down, the money problem disappears. Sienna froze outside the door. Money problem? She had always believed Claire stopped paying because she was angry. But now, it sounded like there had never been enough money in the first place. David ended the call and noticed her standing there. His smile disappeared for a split second. "What are you doing?" "I was looking for the registration." He nodded too quickly. "It's in the kitchen." She walked away without another word. For the first time in years, a question echoed in her mind. What if Claire had been telling the truth? Claire had barely finished her morning coffee when her phone rang. It was Arthur Miller, one of her oldest payroll clients. He almost never called. "Claire," he said quietly, "do you have a few minutes?" "Of course. I'd rather talk in person." Something in his voice made her leave immediately. Arthur had owned a family construction company for over 30 years. When Claire arrived, he closed his office door before speaking. "I owe you an apology." She looked confused. "For what?" "I almost believed your husband." Her heart skipped. "What did David tell you?" Arthur reached for his phone. "He left me a voicemail." He pressed play. David's voice filled the room. "Arthur. I'm worried about Claire. She's been under a lot of stress lately. She's becoming forgetful, and I don't want payroll mistakes affecting your business. You might want to think about finding someone else before things get worse." The recording ended. Claire couldn't speak. Arthur looked at her with sympathy. "I've worked with you for 15 years. You've caught mistakes my accountants missed. You've answered payroll questions while sitting beside your mother in the hospital." He shook his head. "I know what an unreliable employee looks like." He paused. "And you aren't one." Claire felt tears filling her eyes. It wasn't the accusation that hurt the most. It was realizing David hadn't just lied to her. He had quietly begun destroying her reputation. Before leaving, Arthur emailed her a copy of the voicemail. "Keep it," he said. "You may need it." Claire thanked him and drove straight to Ethan's office. The attorney listened to the recording twice. Then a third time. Finally, he smiled. "This changes things." "How?" "It establishes a pattern." Claire frowned. "A pattern?" "First, your money. Now your professional reputation." He leaned forward. "If David convinces people you're confused or unstable, anything you say becomes easier to dismiss." Claire slowly nodded. "So he isn't protecting himself?" "No." Ethan closed his notebook. "He's preparing people not to believe you." A chill ran down her spine. That evening, Sienna returned to the house while David was out meeting a client. She walked into his office searching for the Jeep title. Instead, she noticed an open folder on his desk. Inside were unpaid tuition notices from Pacific Coast University. Her eyes widened. The balance was nearly $18,000. She flipped through the papers. Every reminder was months old. But Claire had been sending tuition money the entire time. Confused, Sienna opened another folder. Bank statements. Loan notices. Overdue business debts. Then she found a printed email. "Once Claire signs the refinancing documents, everything will be covered." Sienna froze. Claire had never stopped paying because she hated her. She had stopped because there had never been any tuition payments to begin with. For the first time in her life, Sienna realized her father might have been using both of them. She quietly returned every document to its place. But she couldn't stop shaking. When David came home that night, she looked at him differently. And for the first time, he noticed. Sienna didn't sleep that night. The tuition notices kept replaying in her mind. So did the email. "Once Claire signs the refinancing documents, everything will be covered." By morning, she had made a decision. She called Claire. When Claire saw her name on the screen, she hesitated before answering. "Hello? I need to talk to you." Claire remained silent. It isn't about money. It's about my dad. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe overlooking the beach in Santa Barbara. Sienna looked nothing like the confident young woman from the birthday dinner. No designer clothes. No expensive handbag. Dark circles under her eyes. She sat down and slid a folder across the table. I found these. Claire opened it slowly. Inside were copies of unpaid tuition notices, business loan statements, and a printed email. Her eyes stopped on one sentence. Claire still believes the transfers are going to the university. She looked up. Where did you get this? Dad's office. Claire felt her chest tighten. So, my tuition wasn't being paid. Sienna shook her head. I checked with the university yesterday. My account is months behind. Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. I transferred every payment. I know. For the first time. Neither of them blamed the other. Later that afternoon, Claire met Ethan again. He carefully reviewed every document Sienna had brought. Then he opened another file. I have something to show you. He placed a single form on the desk. It was an application to add David as a joint owner of one of Claire's investment accounts. Claire frowned. I never signed this. You didn't. Ethan pointed toward the signature. The investment company rejected it. Why? The signature didn't match yours. Claire stared at the paper. Someone had tried to gain access to her investments. Someone who knew exactly how much money was in the account. Only 2 people knew that balance. Claire. And David. She slowly leaned back in her chair. So it wasn't just the tuition. Ethan shook his head. No. I think your husband was preparing for something much bigger. That evening David came home carrying flowers. White lilies. Claire's favorite. I thought we could start over. She accepted the bouquet. For a brief moment, David smiled. Then, she quietly placed the flowers on the kitchen counter without thanking him. I met Sienna today. His smile disappeared. What? She knows the tuition was never paid. Silence. David's face turned pale. You went through my office? I didn't. Sienna did. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally David sighed. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Claire looked directly into his eyes. No. I finally understand exactly who you've been. For the first time since their marriage. David had no answer. The next morning, Claire officially hired Ethan to begin legal proceedings. Before we file anything, he said, there's someone you should meet. Who? David's ex-wife. Claire blinked. I thought they barely spoke. They don't. But yesterday, she called me. That afternoon Claire arrived at a quiet cafe in Santa Barbara. A woman in her early 50s stood as she approached. I'm Rebecca Carter. Claire nodded politely. Thank you for meeting me. Rebecca gave a tired smile. I wish we'd met under different circumstances. They ordered coffee. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Finally Rebecca sighed. I've been waiting years for someone to ask the right questions. Claire frowned. What do you mean? Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. I kept everything. Inside were old bank records. Emails. Divorce papers. Loan documents. Claire slowly turned the pages. The date stretched back almost 10 years. Rebecca looked at her. David did almost the same thing to me. Claire felt her stomach tighten. He convinced me that his business just needed temporary help. She nodded. I believed every word. Rebecca laughed bitterly. So did I. He always had an explanation. The next investment. The next client. The next project. He promised we'd recover every dollar. Claire whispered. But we never did. Rebecca slowly shook her head. No. Then she pointed to one of the documents. This payment. Claire looked closer. It was made from Rebecca's personal savings. The money was supposed to pay our mortgage. Rebecca smiled sadly. Instead, it covered one of David's business loans. Claire suddenly realized she wasn't listening to a different story. She was listening to her own story. Just years earlier. There was something else, Rebecca continued. He liked making people believe I was emotional. Claire looked up. What? He'd tell friends I was overwhelmed. That I couldn't handle stress. That I was becoming forgetful. Claire's hands tightened around the coffee cup. My clients have been hearing the same thing. Rebecca nodded. I know. He isolates people before they stop trusting him. Silence settled over the table. Finally Rebecca leaned forward. Claire. I don't think David ever expected you to check the bank statements. Later that afternoon Ethan called. I have more news. Claire answered immediately. What happened? The investment company finished its review. And? The request to add David to your investment account came from an IP address registered to Carter Development Group. Claire closed her eyes. So it was his office. Yes. But proving exactly who submitted it will still take time. Claire wasn't disappointed. She no longer needed perfect proof. She had something far more powerful. A pattern. The money. The fake tuition payments. The rumors about her memory. The investment account. Rebecca's documents. Piece by piece. Everything was beginning to fit together. That evening, as Claire sat alone on her patio watching the sun disappear over the Pacific Ocean, her phone vibrated. It was a text from David. Please, let's fix this before lawyers destroy our family. Claire read the message once. Then deleted it. For months, she had been trying to save a marriage. Now, she was finally trying to save herself. 3 days later, Ethan officially filed the first legal documents. By that evening, David had completely changed. The anger disappeared. So did the accusations. Instead, Claire came home to fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. The refrigerator was stocked with her favorite food. Dinner was already cooking. I thought we could have a peaceful evening, David said with a warm smile. Claire quietly hung up her coat. You don't have to do this. I'm trying to save our marriage. She looked at him for several seconds. Just a week earlier he had called her selfish. Now he acted like the perfect husband. The change came too fast. It didn't feel like love. It felt like strategy. Over the next several days, David became almost impossible to criticize. He made coffee every morning. He folded the laundry. He even warmed a heating pad because he knew Claire's back had been hurting. For one dangerous moment, she almost believed him. Loneliness had a strange way of making people remember only the good moments. She caught herself wondering. Maybe he's finally changed. Then she remembered the bank statements. The voicemail. The fake tuition payments. The forged investment request. Reality returned. Friday evening, David walked into the living room carrying a leather folder. I need a small favor. Claire didn't touch it. What is it? Just refinancing paperwork. He placed the documents on the coffee table. Our lender needs one more signature. Claire slowly opened the folder. Her eyes moved across the pages. Then she froze. Her house. The Santa Barbara home she had owned long before meeting David was listed as collateral. She looked up. You want to use my house? Our house. No. My house. David's smile weakened. It would only be temporary. Claire continued reading. The loan amount wasn't just enough to keep his business alive. It would also cover overdue debts, credit lines, and thousands of dollars he already owed. She quietly closed the folder. So this is why you've been bringing flowers. David sighed dramatically. I thought we were rebuilding trust. You thought I was going to sign. Silence. Then David made the biggest mistake of his life. He looked directly at Claire and said quietly, "Your first husband would have helped." Everything inside the room seemed to stop. Claire slowly stood. What did you say? He shrugged. From everything you've told me, Michael would have done anything for his family. Claire felt tears burning behind her eyes. My late husband built this home with me. She pointed toward the front door. He spent 28 years protecting this family. Her voice became firm. You don't get to use his name to sell me your debts. Without another word, she picked up the bouquet of white lilies David had brought the day before and dropped it into the trash. David stared at her in complete disbelief. Not because she threw away the flowers, but because, for the first time, his manipulation hadn't worked. Later that night, Claire called Ryan. He arrived within an hour. Neither of them spoke much. Ryan quietly repaired the broken backyard gate while Claire sat on the patio. When he finished, he sat beside her. I'm sorry, Claire whispered. For what? I should have listened to you sooner. Ryan smiled sadly. I wasn't trying to be right. I was trying to protect my mom. Claire couldn't hold back the tears anymore. For the first time in weeks, she cried. Not because she was losing her marriage, but because she finally understood. She had been fighting to save something that had never truly existed. A week later, Ethan called. The California Business Leadership Awards are next Friday. Claire immediately understood. David had talked about that event for months. He was expected to receive the Regional Business Excellence Award, the biggest achievement of his career. There's something else, Ethan continued. He already confirmed that you'll be attending. Claire frowned. I never agreed. I know. He told the organizers you've both worked through your recent family misunderstanding. She let out a quiet laugh. So he still needs me. Ethan nodded. He doesn't need your support. He needs your reputation. The following afternoon they met in Ethan's office. I have an idea, he said. Claire folded her arms. I'm listening. Don't go there to expose him. She looked surprised. Then why go? Go there. To stop protecting him. Claire stayed silent. There is a difference, Ethan continued. You don't need dramatic accusations. You only need the truth. No exaggeration. No anger. Only facts. For the first time in weeks, Claire felt completely calm. The night before the ceremony, Ryan stopped by the house. He brought takeout from Claire's favorite Italian restaurant. Neither of them talked much about the event. Instead, they watched the sunset from the patio. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. Are you nervous? Claire smiled faintly. I've been nervous for weeks. He reached over and squeezed her hand. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you. Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear those words. Friday morning arrived. Claire stood in front of her bedroom mirror fastening a simple pair of pearl earrings. They had been a gift from her late husband, Michael, on their 25th wedding anniversary. She looked at herself for several seconds. For weeks she had wondered whether people believed David. Whether they thought she was unstable. Whether they questioned her judgment. Not anymore. Today wasn't about convincing anyone. It was about refusing to lie. Ryan drove her to the convention center in downtown Santa Barbara. Outside, photographers and reporters gathered near the entrance. Business owners from across California filled the lobby. David stood near the ballroom, laughing with investors and shaking hands. When he noticed Claire, his face lit up. He walked over confidently, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and kissed her cheek as cameras flashed. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. Claire smiled politely for the photographs. "I said I would." He leaned closer. "After today, all of this will finally be behind us." She looked directly into his eyes. "No, it won't." For a split second, his smile faded. Then the cameras turned toward them again. And the charming businessman returned. As they entered the ballroom, nearly 200 guests stood applauding the opening speaker. Round tables covered with white linens filled the room. Bankers, attorneys, business owners. Several of Claire's own clients smiled and waved as she walked past. David noticed. He leaned toward her once more. "When they introduce me, just smile." Claire met his gaze. "Why?" "So everyone knows we're united." She looked toward the stage. Then back at him. "I spent 2 years helping you protect your image." She paused. "I'm done doing that." David's confident expression disappeared. For the first time that morning, he looked genuinely worried. The ballroom fell silent as the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to recognize this year's recipient of the California Regional Business Excellence Award, Mr. David Carter." Applause filled the room. David stood, smiling confidently as he walked toward the stage. Halfway there, the host smiled again. "Before presenting the award, we'd like to invite Mrs. Claire Carter to say a few words." David turned toward her. His smile grew even wider. Exactly as he had planned. He expected praise. He expected support. He expected another performance. Claire calmly stood and walked to the podium. Nearly 200 people watched in complete silence. She adjusted the microphone. Then smiled politely. Marriage has an interesting way of blending reputations. The room grew quiet. For almost 2 years. Many people assumed that because I stood beside my husband, I agreed with every decision he made. She paused. "I no longer do." David's smile faded. Claire continued calmly. "My husband recently reminded me that I have no parental role in supporting his adult daughter. So I respected that boundary. I stopped paying expenses that belonged to her parents." A few guests exchanged confused glances. She continued. "After reviewing my financial records, I discovered that thousands of dollars I believed were paying for college tuition had been redirected elsewhere." David suddenly stepped toward the stage. "Claire." She raised one hand. "I'm almost finished." The room became so quiet that the clinking of silverware from the kitchen echoed through the ballroom. "I also learned that false information about my professional competence had been shared with several of my clients." She carefully chose every word. "I have now filed legal proceedings, and a forensic financial review is underway." She didn't accuse. She didn't shout. She simply stated facts. Then she looked around the room one last time. "I came today because my presence has been used as proof that everything in our marriage is perfectly fine. It isn't. And I will no longer allow my name to protect a story that isn't true." Claire stepped away from the microphone. Silence. No applause. No shouting. Only silence. David quickly grabbed the microphone. "I'm sorry," he said with an embarrassed laugh. "My wife has been under tremendous emotional stress lately." Several people shifted uncomfortably. "We've been dealing with private family matters." He smiled sympathetically. "Sometimes stress makes people see things differently." For one awful moment. It almost sounded believable. Then, a chair scraped loudly across the ballroom. Everyone turned. Arthur Miller slowly stood. "I'd like to say something." Without waiting for permission, he walked toward the front of the room holding his phone. "I've trusted Claire with my company's payroll for 15 years. He looked directly at David. "And last month, you left me this voicemail." He pressed play. David's recorded voice echoed through the ballroom. "Arthur, Claire has been getting forgetful. You should probably replace her before she starts making serious mistakes." The recording lasted less than 20 seconds. It didn't need to be longer. The room exploded into whispers. Several business owners looked at Claire. Others looked at David. No one smiled anymore. Arthur slipped his phone back into his pocket. "I buried my wife after her battle with Alzheimer's." His voice remained calm. "I don't appreciate anyone using that disease to destroy another person's reputation." He returned to his seat. David stood frozen. For the first time in years, he had absolutely nothing to say. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The whispers grew louder. David forced a smile and stepped back toward the microphone. "Everyone, please. This is a misunderstanding." Before he could continue, another chair scraped across the ballroom. Sienna stood. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her father. Then at Claire. Finally, she walked toward the stage. "Please let me say something." The room fell silent again. David's face turned pale. "Sienna, sit down." She didn't. Instead, she placed a thick envelope on the podium. "I found these in my father's office." David took a step forward. "You had no right." "I had every right." She interrupted him for the first time in her life. "I thought Claire stopped paying my tuition because she wanted to punish me." She swallowed hard. "I was wrong." She slowly removed several papers from the envelope. They're notices from Pacific Coast University. She held them up for everyone to see. "My tuition hasn't been paid for months." A wave of whispers spread across the ballroom. Sienna continued. "Claire transferred every payment. My father never sent the money to my school." David shook his head. "That's not what happened." She ignored him. "I also found business loan statements. An email saying Claire still believed the money was going to the university." Claire watched in complete silence. She hadn't expected this. Not today. Not from Sienna. David stepped toward his daughter. "You're confused." "No." She looked directly into his eyes. "For the first time. I'm not." He reached for the papers. She pulled them back. "You lied to me. You lied to Claire. And you expected both of us to keep believing you." The room was completely silent. Several reporters who had been covering the awards ceremony quietly raised their phones. Others began taking notes. David noticed. Panic flashed across his face. One of the board members slowly approached the microphone. "Mr. Carter. Based on the information presented today, the committee is suspending this award pending a formal review." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. David stared in disbelief. "You can't do this." The chairman remained calm. "We're not making a judgment. We're protecting the integrity of this organization." David looked around the room. A banker who had greeted him warmly earlier avoided eye contact. One of his investors quietly walked toward the exit. Another guest folded the business proposal David had handed him that morning and slipped it back into his briefcase. No one came to David's defense. Not one person. Sienna slowly turned toward Claire. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry. I treated your kindness like it was something you owed me." Claire walked across the stage. For a moment neither woman spoke. Then Claire quietly answered. You don't owe me an apology for believing your father. She paused. But from this moment on, believe people's actions, not just their words. Sienna nodded. I will. Behind them, David remained standing alone under the bright stage lights. Only a week earlier, he had expected to leave with a trophy. Instead, he walked off the stage with everyone watching him for a completely different reason. The legal battle lasted almost a year. It wasn't dramatic. There were no surprise witnesses. No courtroom speeches. Just thousands of pages of financial records. Bank statements. Emails. Loan agreements. One document after another. Piece by piece. The truth became impossible to ignore. A forensic accountant confirmed that a large portion of Claire's money had never been used for Sienna's education. Instead, it had been redirected to keep Carter Development Group alive. Business loans. Overdue interest. Private debts. Even payments David had hidden from his own daughter. When the evidence was complete, David's attorneys requested a settlement. They knew the documents spoke louder than any argument. Claire recovered much of the money she had lost. Not all of it. Legal fees consumed far more than she expected. Justice, she learned, was expensive. Within months, David's business collapsed. Major investors pulled out. 2 development projects were cancelled. The luxury SUV he had been so proud of disappeared from the driveway. Soon afterward, he sold the house he had purchased during the marriage and moved into a small apartment outside Santa Barbara. For the first time in years, he had no one left to impress. Sienna withdrew from college for 1 semester. She found a part-time job at a local bookstore and applied for student loans. One afternoon she asked Claire to meet for coffee. I've started repaying the charges I made on your credit card. Claire smiled. I know. Sienna looked down at her cup. I spent years believing kindness meant weakness. Claire gently shook her head. No. It means someone trusted the wrong person. Sienna nodded. I won't make that mistake again. Neither would Claire. Ryan helped his mother repaint the guest room. The room David had occupied was finally empty. Together they replaced old furniture, planted flowers in the backyard, and repaired everything Claire had postponed while paying someone else's bills. One evening they sat on the porch watching the Pacific Ocean turn orange beneath the setting sun. Ryan smiled. The house feels different. Claire looked around. It isn't the house. It's me. For the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful. A few weeks later, Claire took her mother on a quiet weekend trip along the California coast. They walked slowly through a small seaside town, stopping every few minutes so Margaret could rest her knees. As they watched the waves roll onto the beach, her mother smiled. You know. Claire looked at her. I've been thinking. What about? Margaret gently squeezed her daughter's hand. The strongest thing you ever did wasn't standing on that stage. Claire frowned. It wasn't? Her mother shook her head. It was the day you stopped believing you had to earn love by sacrificing yourself. Claire looked out toward the ocean. For years she had confused generosity with responsibility. She believed love meant fixing every problem, paying every bill, keeping every promise, even the ones that slowly destroyed her. Now she finally understood. Real love never asks you to lose yourself. Months later, Claire returned to the same restaurant where everything had begun. This time there were no arguments. No humiliation. Only dinner with her mother, Ryan, Helen, and Sienna. As they raised their glasses, no one talked about the past. They talked about new beginnings. Claire smiled quietly. She hadn't won because David lost. She had won because she finally stopped allowing someone else's lies to define her life. And for the first time in years. That was more than enough.